Welcome to the Webinar Talk Show. I'm Eliz Greene.
And my name is Thom Singer. And Eliz and I started this format of the Webinar Talk Show because we believe that webinars and online events, they can be better than just a talking head over PowerPoint. When you have the opportunity to have in-depth interviews and conversations, people get the content and they're more engaged.
Absolutely true. But here's the thing, Thom. I think that our amazing event industry professional partners are a little bit stressed these days, looking at what's happening in the world of events and wondering, is it time to make that pivot from an in-person event to a virtual event?
Well, it has certainly been like drinking out of a fire hose. And a lot of people did cancel their events for this year, thinking that by the fall, we'd be full bore back into these live events. And obviously, somewhat sadly, the pandemic continues and we can't do that. So Eliz and I have a motto: don't cancel your event.
Don't cancel your event. That's right. Because your people, they need you more than ever right now. And as we were thinking about how could we best serve our meeting industry partners, we thought, why not gather some people who have actually done that successfully and talk about what did they do, what worked, what didn't work, what advice do they have for people who are looking at making this pivot. And we have some good people aboard today and a little bit longer time today also, so that we can have a very rich, in-depth conversation.
So for this episode, this special episode of the Webinar Talk Show, we have invited 5 panelists to join us. And our first panelist who's going to join us is Nikki Harris. And Nikki is the Director of Member Success. What a cool title. The Director of Member Success for the National Speakers Association. And we'll get to learn a little bit about what they did with the pivot of their Influence 2020 conference earlier this summer. So Nikki, welcome. Welcome to the Webinar Talk Show.
Hi, thank you.
So we're glad to have you. Anything that you'd like to add real quick about stuff that you've seen the last few months?
No, I'm just really happy to be here with all of you and excited to talk about this. I think this is the time to do it.
I think so too. Our next guest is Celess Tyrell. She is the Director of Online Learning for multiple nursing associations. We are so delighted to have her here. We actually asked our friends at Digitel, hey, who would you recommend talking to about how to successfully pivot an in-person education event? And they didn't give us a list of people, they gave us one name. So welcome, Celeste. We're so glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be here today.
And next up, we have Todd Zint. And Todd is someone I've known for a long time. And he is with Access Destination Services. They're a DMC group. And he is the general manager for the Austin and San Antonio office. And he is also on the board of Site Texas. And recently, they put on sort of a hybrid event to show organizations how to put on a hybrid event, which is why I wanted Todd to join us today. Todd, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks, Thom.
And in a double whammy, we have Joe Heaps and Dave Reed from eSpeakers. They are, from the speaker side of the equation, always 2 people that we enjoy talking to. They really put us as professional speakers in the best light on that side of the business and have done some wonderful things about helping us shift into the virtual world. But on the event professional side, are really the marketplace for finding excellent experts for your events. So guys, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Appreciate it.
All right, let's dive in. Let's do a quick go-around round of what did you pivot? And if somebody is in the audience thinking to themselves, I think it's time, what's one piece of advice you would give them to not cancel their event and move into that virtual or hybrid space? Let's start with you, Nikki.
You're muted.
Muted. We pivoted our annual conference, NSA Influence, and it was a lot, but it was so worth it. And we did it rather quickly. I think we had about a 2-week turnaround time to completely pivot everything. So I think my advice is don't wait, just do it. Put a plan together quickly, make the call, and just do it, because your audience needs that content, they need that education, and they're willing to jump into that virtual space with you.
So Nikki, you guys did something that was really interesting in the fact that you pulled your concurrent sessions, your 25 breakouts that were scheduled, and you did them in advance of the conference for 3 months leading up to it. So tell us a little bit about sort of that process.
Yeah, that was a big process. There were a lot of sessions twice a week for 3 months is quite a bit. And so what we really wanted to focus on with those breakout session presenters is not so much dwelling on the fact that COVID is hit and that, oh gosh, now we have to go virtual and here's what you can do in this small time frame, because we really don't know how long this is going to be. This could be, I don't want to say the new normal, but the new moving forward, if you will. So it was really important that we had conversations with them to really discuss about moving into the virtual platform. So I believe every single one of those presenters had done virtual in some capacity. So this was not new to them. So they focused on how they can help our audience be able to pivot, because a lot of our audience members hadn't made the pivot yet. They hadn't done virtual yet. So that was really important for us. And it worked out really, really well. And then we also had 2 amazing hosts. In fact, they're here, Thom and Eliz. You guys played a huge role with those sessions in the 3 months, and it made the event, I believe, and set us up for success.
Well, it was a lot of fun. And just getting to have that energy and the excitement leading up, I think was a really fun way to get people excited, but also we really enjoyed it.
It was a lot of fun and a lot of work, because it wasn't just the 2 sessions. We had to do production calls for all of them. So it was very time consuming, but well worth it.
All right, Celess, what did you pivot?
So I work for 6 specialty nursing organizations, and we're 4 meetings down, 3 to go, but we've pivoted 6 virtual events or 6 physical events to virtual. So yeah, it's been a lot of work. I'd say more work than being on site at a meeting. And like you said, the biggest piece of advice, and I would say all hands on deck. So I work for nonprofit nursing associations, and we have, staff doing all different things, but we've had to get some staff doing stuff that they never thought they'd really do. So our conference department, who'd be on site, now they are the speaker ready room virtually, and they're helping, speakers get comfortable with Zoom, because in our situation, we had some of our expert speakers who had presented virtually, but not all, and some were not comfortable with it and had never done a Zoom screen share. So I would say, yeah, prepare to have all hands on deck and adjusting workflow accordingly, because there's a lot of detail that you don't have to think about on site that you do have to think about virtually.
That's great advice. Thank you. Todd, what have you pivoted?
Oh my gosh, well, being in the hospitality industry and as a DMC, it's been interesting, right? Because we're basically focused on locality. So when people come to our cities, that's mainly our business. So the DMCs definitely had that pivot quite a bit, and obviously it's been a great opportunity for us, because instead of just managing Austin and San Antonio, we're now borderless, right? So, and really tied into these activations that are kind of going across the country. I think the sky's the limit for meeting planners and event organizers with just different ideas. I mean, if you think about 4 or 5 months ago, some of the things that we were all together, kind of inexperienced, kind of going through this motion. But 5, 6 months later, we're at a place where we're matured through this opportunity. And what I'm seeing now is if you think about the evolution, is we started with offering online trivia. Well, now we've kind of moved to now you can watch chefs pretty much present on how to cook. Well, now it's gone even further than that. Now we can send food to your house, have the chef help you prepare that. And now it's even going in even further, where you can have the storytelling of where the origin of that food is coming from. You know, like we have Arctic salmon. You know, it's seeing where that salmon is being harvested, right? So I think my advice to meeting planners today and event organizers is the sky's the limit. I mean, it's a universe of different ideas. There's technologies, there's great speakers that you know, they'll talk about later, but anything is possible as long as you align yourself with the right community that can come out and really collaborate with just great suggestions and ideas. So that's my advice.
I like that. That's great.
Joe and Dave, what have you guys seen, and what have you helped with the pivoting of?
I'll let Dave talk about our certified virtual presenter, but in the early stages of the pandemic times, we had all these jobs, we call them, you know, these events in our marketplace system on the platform that meeting planners or event organizers were hiring other speakers. And so when things started tightening up and people are like, oh no, travel restrictions, and what do we do with our event? Nobody's gonna be able to attend. And things really it kind of got in a big holdup, right? Everything, all the events are kind of figuring out what they're going to do. And we just sat down one day and said, what can we do? And our pivot was, you know, kind of a pivot of being proactive. And so we went to all the events and suggested that they go virtual. And we actually only, out of all the events that were in the system at the time, we only lost one to a cancellation. The rest were able to talk to them and explain the value of maybe postponing it and maybe doing it in the fall or going virtual. And one of the very first ones was in May. Anyway, it ended up being a humongous event with 8,000 attendees for a telecom company in the Philippines. But the nice thing about that is they were really happy about the result, and they weren't sure about it in the beginning. And so, in fact, they're so happy with it that they've come back several times since and see that as a now hybrid version of their events. Well, they're always offer, because you can do things virtually in a meeting that you can't do physically, and vice versa, right? So we're finding those things out. But I think our advice was, the advice I would give is just go with your gut, act quickly. It worked for us there, and it ended up being the right kind of on-ramp to this new world that we're living in. And it's very easy to sit back and say, oh, I'll see what they do, or what they do, or we don't know if we want to do that. And it's super easy to do that. And so if you just go with your gut and say, we're going with it. The interesting thing, just to add to that, was that as we did that, we also put some things in place to move the speakers forward, and speakers pivoted super fast, as opposed to event organizers. And you can understand the speakership is like this big and it can turn quick. The event organizer ship is huge. So when you say turn, it's like, you know, it's just barely moving, you know, it's a big process. So totally understand that. But I'll let Dave talk more about the speaker pivot.
Well, we'll probably talk about that a little bit later, but one of the things that we identified that meeting planners and event organizers would need in this new virtual world is a way to know which speakers were set up and ready to go and equipped and knew how to use this new technology. And so we developed the Certified Virtual Presenter program, which speakers can come in and again, we'll probably talk a little bit more about this later, but we vet one-on-one with speakers and put them through an obstacle course, so to speak, and Thom, you've been through it. Eliz, I think you have as well. And so when you wear that badge, the Certified Virtual Presenter badge, that lets event organizers know that you're qualified to come on and use this equipment and the tools, and you know what you're doing in this environment, that you have a good...
Put it in the corner for us today.
Yeah, should have had it in there. So that's that. You know, as far as a piece of advice, my advice actually is close to the lines that Todd talked about. And that is that I would encourage anyone planning a virtual event not to just try to make the ugly kid sister of a real event, right? Don't let this be something that your attendees have to settle for because we can't do the thing we want to. There are so many new opportunities that you can do with virtual that you can't do on site. Take advantage of those, be creative, and make an event that when it's over, the attendees say, man, that was really cool. You know, I would do that again in a heartbeat. We got to do some things we couldn't have done in person, and I really like that. And so that would be my advice: is don't think too small. Don't just make it be, you know, your second choice. Make it be awesome.
So Dave, that actually is a good transition. Let's talk for a minute with everybody about selecting speakers in this environment, because it's a different skill set. I know, because I've done it. Eliz has done it. Going from being a live stage keynoter to sitting in the corner in front of a camera by yourself, it's a different skill set. And so, Nikki, in your case, all of your presenters for your conference were professional speakers because you're the National Speakers Association, or at least most of them were. And yours were all pre-chosen because you pivoted an existing event. So what were some of the things that you needed to be aware of with speakers? And then I'd like to go to Celeste, because I assume in the Nurses Association, most of your speakers are not professional speakers. So what did you have to do to prepare? So Nikki, let's start with you.
Yeah, so we were really fortunate that we have professional speakers as our membership base. So it actually was really easy to be able to make that shift, even if some of them maybe weren't doing as much virtual as maybe the next presenter was. But I truly feel that having you two as the hosts and facilitating those sessions was huge, instead of just a talking head coming out. I mean, we did 3 months. That is a lot. That would have got really boring really quickly, even if they had really good content. But having you two as the hosts, and I would suggest this for a lot of folks who are going to go virtuals, to bring on hosts, because it helped not only for the consistency of the 3 months, but it also helped our presenters with certain questions maybe that they weren't thinking of, that you guys had come up with along the way, and interacting with them. It was brilliant. And so we were really fortunate in that space.
Well, and the other thing that we did is, together with your staff, we came up with 7 different formats so that not every one of the 25 breakout sessions over 3 months was exactly the same. So there was longer speech, shorter interview, shorter speech, longer interview, entire interview, video, and dissecting kind of what was going on. So we had different formats for them to choose what was the best way for them to showcase their content. And so in working with an MC, be it Eliz and I or somebody else, that MC can bring some things to the table that maybe the staff wouldn't have thought of.
Exactly. And it worked out really well. I mean, I don't think I heard one complaint. And that says a lot considering how many sessions we actually pulled off. So I think that was a real important piece of it.
And Celeste, how about you? I assume most of your speakers are people from your industry. So what have been some of the pivots in working with presenters?
Yeah, so all of our presenters are nurses or doctors, with the exception of a few keynotes that are professional speakers about joy in the workplace and things like that. And for those that are professional speakers, it was a lot easier. For those that were not, you know, their initial communications explained, you know, that what they'd be using, the platform they'd be using, a tip sheet. And if you have questions, please reach out to us. And so we had staff prepared to get on a Zoom call with them, walk them through sharing their screen, making sure their headset sounded okay, and walking them through all of that. We also had them log in 60 minutes before their session, which seemed to a lot of them like a lot of time, but we needed it because in that time frame, we got them comfortable again with the platform. We talked about when we were going to run their polling questions live, what the flow of the event was going to be. We had a moderator or an MC for each of their sessions to sort of facilitate that and be the bridge between the audience and the speaker, because we had our speakers logged into Zoom and our audience in a different platform. So it did take a lot more work up front to prepare our speakers. It wasn't just them getting there and getting on a flight and arriving at the hotel, the convention center. It was making sure that they were comfortable ahead of time. And some of our speakers had done it a few times. In particular, we had a few who might be professors at colleges. They were fine. But there were a lot who had never done anything like this before. And so there was a learning curve there, and we had staff prepared to just help them.
Curious, Todd, is there anything different that you did? Because I know you did a hybrid event. Is there anything you did differently with your speakers to prepare them for that?
It was interesting. I mean, having Thom obviously involved in that experience, and he had experience prior to that. I mean, we really took a chance with Site Texas, and we were like, you know, we have to be the trailblazer because there's so many people. And this event happened July 22nd, by the way. It seems like months ago, but you know, we spent a lot of time with really identifying which ones we should pre-record, and not knowing sometimes when you have industry speakers or people that are CEOs of companies that maybe really sound good live, and really not knowing because they're not professional speakers. We did pre-record some people, and I think that really helped, because if they wasn't on the mark or the message that we really wanted them to be, we had the opportunity to re-record instead of them just being live in the feed. And it's like, wow, they just went a direction that we really didn't want to for our goals and our vision of everything. So Thom really did a good job with really also with those pre-recorded interviews. He was the one that had that interview. So it wasn't just the president basically speaking like a talking head. The interview style, I think, really worked really well. So that's something I think was very successful in our event.
And I just wanted to mention, if you are here as one of our attendees and you have a question for our panel, please pop that right into the Q&A, and Thom and I will see that, and we'd be happy to bring that in. Let's shift a little bit and talk about, how did you really develop or deliver on member value? How did you know what your members needed, and how did you evaluate whether it worked? Let's go. So Joe,
Yes,
and Dave, you've worked with multiple groups. I guess I'm really interested to know if you have some advice on that measurement piece, or how do you know what your members need? What advice do you give people when they're making this shift?
I think initially,
In person.
yeah, I think initially when, again, going back to like April, March-ish time, initially we could see that this is a real problem for speakers. Like, if you can't go and present live, you know, that's a problem. Most speakers hadn't ever, well, I can't say that. There were a good group of speakers that have presented virtually for a long time, but most speakers didn't have anything on the calendar. And so there was a big problem there. And Dave and I just sat down one day and just talked about, what can we do? How can we add value? And what came out of that was the certified virtual presenter certification. And we felt like we could do one thing by giving back to the industry. We spent a ton of time, so much time, putting that together. And Celess was talking about all hands on deck. I mean, Dave and I were booked all day. I literally had 8 or 10 of those a day for all of May and most of June. We just put everything else on the shelf and just completely focused in on that certification, because we could see the value of having these speakers that are certified and what that would mean to this group of event organizers that weren't sure about, like, how do we put a person in front of our corporate team? And so that was probably the biggest thing in my mind that we were able to do, is see the value, or, you know, the need with the speakers, and trying to solve that with us doing the vetting and leaving that question out of the event organizer's mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and Eliz, you'd also asked about how the organization can measure the success of an event, right? How they can find that out. We're less involved in that side of things, but from what I understand, many of the events that we have provided speakers for, the organization doing that has gone back and surveyed their members afterwards and had very positive results. And so, I mean, just a simple survey, you know, if you, one of the nice things about, well, I guess you would get this with a physical as well, but when you do it online, you know who was there, right? Because your meeting software will give you a list of all the attendees. And so that's gold. I see Celeste nodding her head. You can mine that list of attendees session by session. You know exactly who was in there, and can do things as simple as just polling to find out what they thought of it.
So I'll chime in and just say that we have to evaluate our attendees because of our accrediting body requires that we do that. And then as far as what the members want and need too, you know, so for us, our members come to us for quality nursing education. And so we know that they come to us and we sell that content even before virtual. We record all of our sessions and it's made available to non-attendees to purchase later. So what we know is this, that when they choose to come to our event, they're not just coming for the content, because if they wanted that, they'd stay at home and buy it later. We know that they're coming because they want to visit the place, right? And for networking and an experience. So then the question is, well, okay, how do we meet that need virtually? Because the education for us isn't in question. We know that we have the quality education. We know we have the expert speakers. So, you know, what do we do? How do we meet that other need? We can't recreate a city. So how are we giving them networking opportunities and engagement opportunities? And I can speak to that in a little bit, but going back to actually evaluating it, we're required to. So we have evaluation results coming in and they've been really positive. And we've even asked them, you know, what are your favorite features of the virtual event platform? Because we have all sorts of engagement opportunities to look and see, okay, well, what needs to be better? What did they like? What did they not like? The other thing is, you know, so our sessions or our meetings were 4 to 5 days, general session, and then we had, you know, 2 to 3 concurrents running live, and we pre-recorded probably 20 to 30 sessions per meeting as well that people could access before and after the event. But during every session, there was a chat box, and I had staff monitoring every session, the chat the entire time, because there's anecdotal information that's coming from there that's not going to be on the evaluation results. Now I could pull those logs, but to sort through all those logs later. So watching the entire time and seeing the feedback is going to be really important for us to make determinations for our other virtual events and how to, you know, incorporate that attendee feedback. Yeah.
And Nikki, you had said that, you know, your members, you didn't have a lot of complaints about anything that happened, which for anyone from an association who's watching, to have very few complaints is a huge win for an association. So how did you measure what the members thought of the overall process, both the 3 months leading up with the breakouts and then the 3 days of influence itself?
Yeah, so we got the real time from the chat box. We asked specific questions. Staff within the chat box would ask specific questions to get some feedback from them. But we also got feedback from our Facebook group. So we had a Facebook group specifically for our Influence 2020 attendees and registrants. And they, you know, our audience, they love to connect and network. They don't have a problem speaking with one another or using the Facebook platform. So we were really fortunate to get a lot of that very quickly through Facebook, through the chat box. And then when the whole thing was said and done, at the very end, we sent out an evaluation survey. So we got some feedback there as well.
Well, I think that's a really good suggestion because in addition, as Celeste, you were saying that you're providing the educational content, but there's that community part that people really want. The Facebook group was a really valuable tool, and I've seen other organizations use that as well, even for in-person events, that there's a special Facebook group just for that event that does allow us to interact in a different way than we would be able to, you know, it's a little less anonymous even for an in-person event. So that, I like that idea.
Which leads us right into what Celeste was talking about, and that is, how do you make the community piece really work? How do people get networking when they're in this type of a world? So Celeste, you brought it up, so we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, for us, it was pretty easy because of the platform we decided to use. So all the nursing organizations that I work with already use Digital's Opus as their learning management platform system. So our attendees, even when we had physical on-site meetings, they would visit this online platform to download their handouts to complete their evaluations that they're required to do. So there was a comfort level there, and we used them for webinars as well. So it was easy to decide to use them because our membership is comfortable with that platform already, and we trust them, and we've had a long-term relationship with them. So we went with that platform, and there was a lot built in. So we didn't do an external Facebook group. We wanted to keep them all at the event page or the event hub or whatever you want to call it the entire time. So we built a social wall there. We had an online forum there so we had our moderators at the end of every session encourage the attendees to continue these discussions in the forum. And then they received an email each day with the communications that had happened the day before. So we had it all tied into one place, because we didn't want them to have to go anywhere else. We wanted to direct them to one page where everything that they needed to attend was there, attending the sessions, downloading materials, continuing the conversations. And even though we did use Digital to actually produce our live sessions, we had happy hour Zooms at the end of the night, and the links were all there. So they weren't searching for anything. It was one place that everything was there.
And Nikki, you guys did something really cool with your dine-arounds and your Meet the Pros sessions in Zoom breakout rooms. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So our actual event dates for those 3 dates in August, that was our main event, if you will. So we had our general sessions, but we also know the importance of networking community within our association and our audience. So we put together these digital dine-arounds. So we got some luminaries, if you will, through NSA. So some past presidents, some of our Hall of Fame speakers, and we asked them to host a room during the lunch hour, and our attendees could pop in and out of whichever room they chose to jump into and connect with. So between that, and we also did a Meet the Pros, a virtual Meet the Pros. And again, same concept. We got pros, we asked them to host a room, and our attendees could jump in and out of those rooms and connect with whomever they wanted. And then at the end of every day, Thom, you were brilliant and did a virtual happy hour and just pop that into the chat and just let people know, hey, if you guys want to continue the conversation, we can do that here. So
yeah, that was an impromptu thing. When the first day broke, I said, let's go to the lobby bar of the hotel. And I just put my Zoom link up. And I was surprised because we had like 60 people show up. And so then every time we ended a general session, I felt like I needed to open the lobby bar. And it turned into something that I think we should always do with every event, because that lobby bar was a big draw for a lot of people.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Same thing for 2 of the virtual events we ran. It was a last minute decision to host the virtual happy hour. And what's really interesting, you talk about one of the benefits of virtual, that's something I had not considered, is we had people who came on. So both of these events I'm referencing, we had about 600 registrants, and we had about 450 logged in live throughout the course of the event. And the virtual happy hour, we had 40 to 60 in each night. Mm-hmm. But some of the people that came in said things like, throughout the course of the event, I, was chatting with other people via text. I'm too shy to do that in person. But now that I met some people this way, I felt like I could do this. And now I can't wait to come to a meeting and meet these people. And so we have some anecdotal insight now that there are people who are not comfortable on site networking, but they come to our meetings, or they'd consider coming to meetings, and here virtual, it's a little bit easier to like dip your toe in the water of networking. And now they've made these connections, and then they came to that Zoom happy hour, and now they're like, oh, I can't wait to go to your next meeting if we get to have it in person. So, it was a really great way to sort of draw some people in who otherwise would not have engaged at all in that type of networking.
Well, we've seen that as Thom and I have hosted the virtual side of hybrid events. We've seen that happen, that in the chat room, people are making friendships and making plans to room together even at the next in-person event. The other piece of networking is often, how do your participants interact with your sponsors or your vendors? And I know, Todd, you had some innovative ways to really, that was a big question in our survey about how do you really get value for your sponsors, your vendors? How did you do that, Todd?
Yeah, first of all, I want to agree with Celeste. I mean, that, networking is really important. And, for this event that we did with Site Texas, our chapter we only have 110 members, and we had 800 people register for the virtual, and we had 50 people that were on site. So that whole networking piece of social was really huge for us. But, turning to the sponsorship discussion, it's really how do you maximize the opportunity, because sponsorship dollars are very minimal today. It's hard to get. I mean, there are crumbs that are out there, and how do you show value for your organization to be able to gain that money from that sponsor, right? So we were able to, work with Thom. He said, why don't we do some interviews ahead of time? And, instead of just sending out sponsorship, commercials or videos that generally sponsors put a lot of money into, we really, during this time of virtual, people want humanized, they want faces, they want to connect, right, to the people that their account managers and who they are. And I think that's something that we're seeing quite a bit. But Thom did these interviews ahead of time on these promotional videos, and we sent them out through our social channels to really engage like relevant topics that are going to be talked through during the event. And then also on site, we had these, we had cutaways where instead of a commercial, Thom actually, we cut to the audience, like we had an audience studio, and Thom actually interviewed these folks and really just talked about, like for example, MW2 is our SEO solution that drives all our social media. And we had the CEO there, the owner, and he really talked about how his company was able to connect the dots and achieve this amplified opportunity to get registrations. So that was fantastic. Yeah, we love that.
The other thing that was cool, the way you set it up, was you did these cutaways throughout the couple hours of the event where we'd go to an interview. But that way, if the main stage had run long or had run short, the interview could be 2 minutes to 5 minutes. So we were able to stay on time because we just used those cutaways as a way to expand or contract the actual time frame, so that we would then, when we went back to the main stage, we would be on time again. I thought that was really smart, and that was the way your team had set that up. I thought that was smart.
Thank you.
So Dave and Joe, you have sort of an interesting position because you are often a sponsor of an event and you work with people who are trying to get sponsors for their events. What do you love as a sponsor? What kind of opportunities do you love to be given? And what kind of things have you seen be successful in honoring those sponsorship or vendor relationships?
Oh, Dave, you're on mute. That means I get to talk first.
Fair enough.
I think one of the things that as a sponsor, one of the things that I absolutely love is for a group to come and say, this is what we have, but what best fits you? Because not every exhibitor or sponsor is cut from the same mold and doesn't have the same objectives. And so this happened just this last year with the National Speakers Association. They had a really awesome events lady, and she came on and just said, hey, look, this is what we're offering, but tell me more about your business and let me understand what your objective in the event is, and then kind of meshed it all together and tried to make it happen. It was really awesome. So I would say if anyone's talking to sponsors, that's a really positive way to help them feel like you're after more than just their money to provide dinner for all the attendees. You actually care about them connecting with the attendees and getting something out of it. And that's important.
Yeah.
We had a few corporate sponsored sessions where we gave them an entire session. And for our attendees, CE is important, but we couldn't offer CE for these because of compliance and accreditation issues. So what we did to encourage participation is we had had like a gamification built in and this leaderboard challenge, but they could earn badges for attending our corporate sponsored sessions. And people get into that. They loved that. So we really saw some great participation in our corporate sponsored sessions. And the corporate sponsor was able to be in the chat, chatting with the attendees, which they really appreciated. And also, to go back to what you said about asking them what they want. Some of them didn't want to do a corporate sponsored session. So we suggested a whole slew of other things. For example, we have a page that all attendees visit to download their materials. They could be a sponsor for that page, and we had a banner at the top thanking them and linking to whatever they wanted and some resources about them. So, you know, we had 15-minute welcome loops that were playing if they wanted to sponsor a welcome loop. So we offered them a whole host of information or options. But our corporate sponsored sessions actually went really well, and we saw great attendance. And they both attendees were happy that they attended it because they liked what the corporate sponsor had to say, and the corporate sponsor was happy with the turnout.
As a sponsor, that is one of my favorite things to be able to do. Any experience that the host can give our company as a sponsoring company to show our expertise, to teach, right? We want to teach. We don't want to sell, we want to teach. And ultimately we want to sell, right? I mean, no mistake about that, but we get there by teaching, and a corporate sponsored session is a great way to do that. Give us a half hour or an hour to do that. But you could also do things in the program printed. That would be for on-site, but you could do the same thing virtually. Or you know, mentions from the stage that would talk not just about some special that we've got going on, but about something we can do that's helpful to the people there and pique their interest and make them want to come learn more from us. That's my favorite thing as a sponsor, to be given chances to do that.
Perfect. Well, and I think it's really funny how we will compete for a badge. You know, I think anytime you can set a goal for people, people will meet it, and it's kind of fun. You know, the very first time somebody gets that badge, people are like, "Well, how'd they get that?"
And it's surprising that people, you know, sometimes we think, oh, well, these are adult professionals, they won't care. Oh, they care, you know. And I've caught myself caring, attending an event. I'm like, why do I care so much about earning that badge? But we do. So. Yeah. And there were prizes. I also, you know, would note that this leaderboard challenge, the top 50 were entered into a drawing to win some really great stuff, like some AirPods. And so there was incentive besides just seeing their name on that leaderboard. There was some incentive.
I worked with a group that had some really great prizes, and that was a big part of how the sponsors got recognized, but also a way that it did keep all the people engaged, like you're saying.
Yeah. And the other thing is, you know, having the prizes is great. That's what gets them earning these badges. But ultimately, it's not just about that. By them participating, it gets them more engaged, which makes their experience better, which makes it so they want to come back, right? So there's badges for them chatting, for completing evaluations, for downloading handouts, for asking questions. And all of those things add up to a more valuable experience for the attendee. So it isn't just about, you know, about getting them to participate in the corporate sponsored sessions. It's all these things adding up and adding value and making the experience something better than if they didn't do any of those things.
So another great transition is, how do you get people to attend in the first place? I mean, we talk about letting them have a great experience. We want them to come back, but I know with a lot of groups I've worked with, you know, they've struggled to get people to attend their event. Maybe they had 500 at their live event and they had 120 at their first digital event. Todd, it was interesting. You said that Site Texas has 125 members and you had 800 people sign up for your event. So your event obviously went global. It might have been that it was to the hospitality industry about hybrid events. So it might have been just timed correctly. But why don't we go around and talk about, how do you drive people to virtual events in the first place?
I've got one suggestion that came up for an event that we provided speakers for recently. This was a big group, and with ultimately thousands of attendees. But and this wouldn't work maybe in every situation, but with this group, they had some leaders who had, I mean, there's a hierarchy there. There were leaders with groups of people who, and ultimately they wanted everybody there. But what they did was, they had a real VIP speaker on that, like a national bestseller, and so people were really interested in interacting with this guy. So what they did was, about an hour before the main session, where they wanted everybody, they opened it up just to this celebrity speaker and these VIPs, this small group of leaders in this organization. And so these small group of leaders got this access, this special access to this guy, and they were into that. They really dug that. And part of the price for that to them was getting their group engaged. So they went through the leaders to get the bigger group engaged by offering the leaders this special access to the celebrity speaker. And I thought that was kind of a clever way to do that. And it worked really well. They had a huge turnout for that.
For us, we did change the way that we marketed the meeting. So traditionally, we had an early bird rate, and then, our regular rate, and you sign up for what sessions you want to attend. We had some post-conferences, pre-conferences. But what we did for virtual was we didn't ask them to sign up for any session, because virtually we don't need to know what room they're in. It's different, so they can pop in and out. And we also gave them the flexibility of listen now or listen later. So we market it like you have, and again, CE is so important to them, their contact hours, they need that. So we said, okay, this is your contact hour cap. And we sold it by a contact hour cap, as opposed to just you're going to the meeting, these are your sessions. And then they could participate live, or they can listen later, and they have an extended time to complete their CE evaluations. However, we are encouraging live participations because we want our corporate sponsors to be happy, and because we know it's not just about the content. And to encourage that live participation, we had the gamification built in. If you're participating live, you can win these things. And then, to speak to what Dave was talking about, we just, for one of the conferences that's coming up, we secured a nurse influencer, an online nurse influencer, who we think is going to be a huge draw. And, for those that are participating live, they're going to get to have this experience with this particular nurse influencer. It's going to be a produced session where he speaks for 15 minutes, and then we're going to have a happy hour with him, that Zoom, where we're going to have moderated. And only those that are our live registrants are going to be able to experience that.
Perfect. Todd, did you have something to add?
No, I think for us, for the amplification of the event was really about the thought leaders in the industry. And, back in July, everybody was, the relevant content was insane, right? How to hybrid was a pretty, at that point, no one really knew, people trying to figure out, should I go live? People were still, some city states were still in, closed down, but, just people were like, how do we hybrid, and what does that look like? So really putting on content, and to everybody's point, that talking about the not pre-recorded information, but opening up a dashboard for people to join early and really engage with that opportunity. The gamification, I mean, Celess is spot on. I mean, it's just, people are insane, especially millennials, that they'll do anything. You don't even have to give anything. You just show their face on the screen in front of, your audience, and they just think everything's the best thing since sliced bread. So I think that's the other thing, is really knowing your audience, right? And if you have, people that have been lawyers that are demographics that are, 60 to 80 years old, the gamification probably won't be it. But most people, like in these the conferences that congresses and different things that people are putting on, the demographics and generations are shifting to younger. So all this virtual really kind of plays in nicely to where we're going into the future.
And I'll say our demographic for most of the groups I work with are 40s and 50s, and they were still into it. I mean, I would say 75% of our registrants are 40 to 50.
Interesting.
Fantastic.
Yeah, which
Nikki, what did
it
you
was
do about-
surprising to me. I didn't know how that they would get into it, and they were. All right.
It's great.
Yeah.
Well, Nikki, what did you guys do with access live versus watch it later?
Sure. So while we were thinking through how we were going to be pivoting this, we when it was going to be hybrid, we had two different pricing points. So it was going to be, this is what you can do for virtual only, and this is what you can do for the VIP. So you get virtual plus you get on site. And then once we made the shift to having to go fully virtual, we put that pricing down to what that virtual ticket price was. And we did that for members and non-members. It was just one price for everyone, because for the speaking industry, they're looking for us. and to help them really make this pivot. So that was incredibly important for us, that ticket pricing. And then we also relied heavily on, for us, the content, because our audience, they're solopreneurs, entrepreneurs. So they're watching their dollars and they're going to invest where they're going to get ROI. And so content is absolutely key. And then once we have the content in place, we rely heavily on marketing, and they really upped their game this year. And it was a lot of fun getting those marketing promotional emails. And then we also rely on our internal members. So those who are attending, our board members, our past presidents, who's already registered, and just spreading the word out to the membership at large and to their network outside of NSA membership. And FOMO with our group is a thing. And so having that Facebook group where you get to go into this group and you get to talk with other registrants is a big thing for our people. So between FOMO, marketing, and really good content for our audience, those are key.
And then people could watch it for up to a month afterwards. Was that right?
Yes. So typically after an event, you have to pay for your recordings, and you get those, however many weeks post event. We opted to allow 30 days post influence for access to those recordings, which was key, especially for those who registered later in the game. I mean, we allowed registration to be open up until the day of the main event dates. So that was really key that they got those extra days to be able to catch up, because we had a lot of sessions.
And what did you see in your numbers of people who watched live versus later?
Kind of a mix. It depended on sometimes the presenter. We had, again, a lot of breakout sessions leading up. I mean, for twice a week for 3 months. So our numbers were around 100 or so. And once we moved to the main event, they jumped up to about 200 to 300. But post event, we get a lot of playback, so into the hundreds.
I've got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know Thom and Eliz, you guys are the ones that are asking the questions, but I've got a question. And that's for the three that have produced events here. But we've seen a trend in the events that we've helped hire speakers for. And the trend is that the attendees are obviously, all virtual, and we've had a few hybrid events in Asia, but the virtual events tend to bring people to the event that wouldn't normally attend physically. And so it's a broader reach. And so I'm just wondering, from those who have produced events, did you have higher numbers? What were your numbers in regards to people that you think would have attended physically that wouldn't have attended otherwise, so.
I'll start. For us, it's our audience, again, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, who ended up losing their calendars for over a year. So even though we went virtual, we weren't seeing up into the thousands like some other organizations have gotten into. But as the event started and people were talking about the value and the level of content that they were receiving, our numbers started to peak quite a bit. But we were not, I know many other folks were into the thousands and we just weren't there, but our audience base, they were so heavily impacted by COVID and lost their main source of income that we weren't into that range, but we still had a pretty good turnout that we were very happy with.
Yeah, this is Todd. I have a friend that works for a direct selling company, and we produced his event in Austin, his live event, and it was about, we supported the event. I'm not gonna say we produced his big live stage, but we supported a lot of peripheral things. He had about 6,000 people in Austin. This year he pushed it to a virtual experience. He had 18,000 people that did it, and more and more people wanted to, but they actually limited it to qualifiers to be able to do it. They've really boomed. In their whole I'm sure the direct selling models, in some circumstances have really boomed, but yeah, he said it was amazing and insane and how many people. So he said moving forward, he'll probably end up doing a hybrid event to allow people that can't come live and also continue doing a virtual type of thing. So it's crazy.
It is. We're going to do the same thing. So events moving forward, we're not going to do virtual sessions 3 months leading up to the event, but we will do it for about 30 days because it just makes sense now. And it was really valuable for our audience. So it's our future for sure.
Celeste, did you see your numbers go up?
So that's a hard one to answer because for 3 of the events that we've done already, we already had their registration from their physical event.
Mm-hmm.
So we give them the option to transfer it to virtual, and many did. So to me, that's not really a true, we already had their registration and they kept it. But the virtual event we just ran last week, on site, we have about 500 registrants and we had 450. So just a little less. So I really, I can't speak too much to it just yet because most of the virtual events we run, we already had the registration that we transferred. And we're also, with the nursing organizations I work with, we're in a strange or unique position in the sense that our nurses need CE to recertify. And the nurses that come to our meetings, these are specialty nursing organizations, and they have certain certificates. So they are going to come to us for the CE. The question is, are they going to come to the event virtually, or are they going to buy the content later? So what I want to look at, 6 months from now, a year to now, I want to look at those that attended virtually. Had they previously attended? For those that had previously attended physically but didn't virtually, are they buying our on-demand content? So that's something I'm going to have to look at long term and really make some comparisons.
When they have a choice, which do they choose?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And we're also in a position where many of our attendees, they had travel bans. They work for healthcare facilities. They weren't allowed to travel. So they really, if they wanted the education, they had no choice to do it, but to do it virtually, because so when we decided that we were going to pivot to virtual, it was, we have to provide the education. They're coming to us for the education. And if we don't provide it, they're going to go to our competitors, right? So we don't want to lose them. So we needed to provide the education, but we also have, after we made that decision, realized that they had no choice. They weren't going to be going to anybody else's physical meeting because they couldn't. They had travel bans. So that helped us, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, well, we have 2 minutes left. I think it's time for a quick round of pep them up. Go tell them that this is the right choice to pivot into the virtual environment. What are some last thoughts? Anybody?
Well, I just saw a question came in regarding pricing, and I'll incorporate that into my last bits of advice regarding pricing. Our pricing models were not that much different, slightly less, but the way that we saw it is they're paying for quality education. They're saving money when they're not going on site. So they're not paying for hotel, they're not paying for air, they're not paying for food. So they're saving, and our education, what are we valuing at it? And we don't want to put ourselves in a corner and make it lower and then a couple of years from now have to inch ourselves back up again. So we did not charge significantly less, but we did offer some group rates. So if you got 10 people to sign up, it was a little bit lower. We did that type of thing. And then you said last little bits of advice. I would say definitely all hands on deck. Think outside of the box as far as what you can do virtually and give them experiences, virtual happy hours, gamification. Make sure you have things that are just for those that are attending live to make it worth them coming. And I would also say, if you can help the attendees understand that the experience that they're going to have, while not the same as on site, they're still going to get their networking experiences. They're still going to get the engagement. And if you're thinking about doing a virtual event and you don't have a way, or you haven't thought about how you're going to do that yet, I think you've got to figure that out. Because if it's just about the content, I don't think it's enough to sell a virtual event. There's so much more than that to make it worthwhile for them.
Smart.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I also say, just do it. Just make it happen and get creative, and definitely invest in some professional MCs.
Oh,
Good one.
Yeah, good.
plugging away. I'd say virtual's here to stay. And your long-term goals should not say, oh, we're doing virtual now, and then we'll have a real physical event in the future. It's always going to be hybrid. When we can meet face-to-face again, every event should be hybrid. I think you're missing the mark if you don't think forward that way.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'll echo what Joe was saying. Don't think of this as something you have to figure out just for now, right? We just have to figure this out for now, and then it'll go back to normal. There is no replacement for a face-to-face event, and those aren't going away. They'll come back as soon as they can, right? There's no replacement for face-to-face, but virtual. People have figured out now that virtual's got some cool things to go along with it, and so that's not going to go away. It's going to be hybrid. We'll be face-to-face and remote, and that's here to stay. I don't see that going away, maybe ever, until we can teleport. Once we can teleport, maybe.
Right.
That will be cool.
Yeah.
Todd, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say, the world's your oyster. There's so much out there. I think a common fault that people kind of are trapped, that people jump into, is they try to find the technology first. I think identifying your goals, your vision, what the purpose of the event is, everything that the speakers have been talking about, and then map it to a solution or a technology that's out there. Technology has definitely been advancing, and a lot of times it's never going to be a one-stop shop kind of thing. But really, it's important to identify what the end result is, and then map back to the technology.
Absolutely. Well, thank you to all of you for joining us here on this special episode of the Webinar Talk Show.
Thank you.
Yes, this has been a great conversation. For those of you who are wondering, yes, it is recorded, and we will be providing that recording on the Webinar Talk Show Facebook page, and we'll be sharing it because this has been a great conversation, and thank you all very much. Thom and I will be back next week with more episodes of the Webinar Talk Show, Monday and Wednesday mornings at 11 Central Time. You can find us at thewebinartalkshow.com, or we would love it if you would like us on Facebook at Webinar Talk Show.
Well, again, thank you so much to everybody who watched this and joined us, and to all of our panelists. And remember what Eliz and I say, don't cancel your event. Make it hybrid, make it virtual, and make it awesome.
Absolutely. See you soon.
Thanks.